Standing on the shore of the Aral Sea, the desperate farmer drops to his knees in discouragement, letting his water bucket roll away on the ground. His family, his crops, his farm animals, and his fellow villagers are all dying from dehydration. The Aral Sea was once a vast lake. Now it is nothing more than a dry desert. This happened due to man's impact on the planet. Anthropogenic change is man's contribution to climate change on the planet. Now, before we go any further in this discussion, I want to remind everyone that as human beings, we tend to go from out of balance to out of balance. So I want to encourage us today, let's find some moderate solutions that each one of us may be able to embrace. According to Stephen Dutch, who wrote the paper Anthropogenic Climate Change, since the Industrial Revolution, two types of human activity have contributed significantly to changes in the Earth's climate. They are modification of the planet's surface and intervention and deployment of new technology. Now, we started going out of balance in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This is when mankind began to modify the Earth and the surface in the atmosphere. One way we did this was by massively clearing farmland and cutting down trees. Now, the green leaves and trees reflect radiant light back up to space, making it cooler. How many of us have stood under the tree in the shade to cool off? The other thing we did is we created steam engines and we created internal combustion engines that release CO2 in the air, trapping heat in our atmosphere. Now, what can we do to help reduce climate change on an individual basis? Let's look at the example of the Aral Sea. Now, these are two contrasting pictures of the Aral Sea. In 1989, we see how large the sea is. In 2014, we see what little is left. It's almost a 90% reduction. What caused this? The Aral Sea was at 68,000 acres of water. And the Soviet Union looked at that and said, let's divert some water to agriculture in the area to grow more cotton, which they did. Some of the finest cotton in the world comes from that area. However, according to Pan, scientists have increasingly directed attention to anthropogenic change because it poses a threat to global security and because human beings can affect it and change it. In this case, if the population had somehow spoken their voices and discouraged the diverting of the water, we would still have the Aral Sea. The side effects or the negative effects of the water being diverted is the Aral Sea reduced from 68,000 water acres down to about 8,000. Secondly, 40,000 villagers lost their jobs. Their seabed of what was the Aral Lake is now full of rusting hulks of ships that the owners couldn't get out of the area. And two, hundreds of villages have gotten up and left the area. Now, anthropogenic change is created by fossil fuels being burned. They release CO2 in the air, which again traps heat. A good option is electric cars and hybrid cars. I prefer hybrid cars because I think it is a moderate solution. Not all fossil fuel, not all electric. Did you know that this is the first electric car from the 1890s? We had electric cars actually before we had internal combustion cars. Now, that will reduce CO2 emissions in the world. Nuclear energy is also a good source for reducing emissions. Here's an example of a nuclear plant living in great harmony with the local environment. France, the United Kingdom, China, and the US are both pressing into nuclear energy as a source. It's very clean burning, releases no CO2. And France, for their part, would like to have 90% of their country supplied with nuclear supplied electricity by the year 2050. Now, we also modify the surface of the earth with our cities, also called heat factories. Why are they heat factories? Because we build them too close together and the wind can't get through to cool things off, and we don't have enough trees and waters to reflect the radiant light. We need to spread our cities out so the wind can get through, and we need to plant more trees, and we need to dig more ponds and water. We need to hold our local officials accountable to help with this. One of the more humorous solutions I heard came out of the Netherlands. Apparently, cattle create methane gas in their digestive system when they are doing their business. So every time a cow does its business, it releases methane gas, and CO2 is supposedly going to increase dramatically from that. For a very short period of time, the Netherlands thought it was a good idea. Well, let's just slaughter all our cows, but people like a good burger, so that didn't pass. In conclusion, what we can do as individuals, keep our government accountable for how they use the natural resources in our nation. 2, reduce but not eliminate fossil fuel consumption by turning to hybrid vehicles. And 3, let's contract our state and federal officials and ask them to please start using nuclear facilities to fund our electricity. Finally, would each of you please take out your cell phone, open up your notes app, and would you please write down one thing that you've heard from my speech today that you think will help you can do that will reduce climate change. Thank you.